So the claim I am refuting is that paying college athletes will negatively affect students. And he uses the secondary claims that paying college athletes will ultimately raise costs or cost all other students more. The value and academic benefit of the scholarship will be diminished, and paying college athletes will create inequality among students, thus hurting them. So his first claim, or my response, is that paying college athletes is actually can be beneficial to them and is the right thing to do. He starts off the first claim that paying college athletes will ultimately cost other students more, and paying these college athletes is actually the right thing to do because they do bring in so much money to the college and the school and to the sports programs. And according to the New York Times in 2011, the NCAA revenue from the 3 weeks of March Madness brought in $770 million, and just comparing that to the Super Bowl, which brought in $480 million, and as well, the combined annual revenue from NCAA basketball and football was $6 billion. Averages about $6 billion. So that is a lot of money that is not going to these players, even though they're the reason why they're bringing in that much money. Players face injury, they have families, and they don't have any time for jobs. So that way they don't get any spending money. So if they're not getting paid, they don't get any. They're getting scholarships, but they're not getting any spending money to spend on the family or necessities. They deserve all the money that they earn. They work really hard, and so they should be getting paid. His second claim is that the value and academic benefit of the scholarship will be diminished, and he shows different tuitions for various schools that are fairly high, but he doesn't show any evidence that the sports programs or the paying of the students does increase these tuitions. They could be increasing from other means such as inflation. And he doesn't describe why or how scholarships are being diminished. He just sort of quotes from a source. It says that paying college athletes would diminish the value of education, which is an opinion and it's not a factual, it's not a fact that can be backed up with evidence. The scholarships wouldn't be diminished. According to New York Times, on an average, athletic scholarships fall around $3,500 short of paying the full tuition and fees. So just paying these college athletes a few $1,000s a year could finish their fees and give them some extra spending money. And this would increase the value of scholarships so they could actually fully attend college without having to pay the full, pay the extra money. And they're not technically above any of the other students because they're not necessarily getting more money, they're just getting the amount of money to pay for the college. Athletes in football and basketball feel unfairly treated. A sports agent, Leigh Steinberg, said. She also continues to say the dominant attitude among players is that there's no moral, ethical reason not to take money because the system is ripping them off. Because of this, scandals were arising. In the University of Miami, a Miami booster ran a Ponzi scheme which provided players with money and cars and other amenities, and he got busted, went to jail, and all the players lost their scholarships. So it shows that they're not getting paid, and they're showing it by doing crime to get money. His third claim is that paying college athletes will create inequality among the students, which thus hurts them. Since their scholarships don't fully pay for their tuition, paying them would help, but it wouldn't necessarily put them above because they're not giving them any more money. And it wouldn't make them, the college athletes already technically are higher up than the normal students because they're on TV and they get talked about in the news. And They usually get cut slack in class because the teachers know that they have to do a lot of work to train for their sports, and so they're always practicing and playing, and so paying wouldn't make a difference. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that you label the advocate's points pretty clearly. There's a straightforward transition to the first point, which is fine. But the very first thing that gets said on that first point is that it's the right thing to do, which turns this into a value claim as opposed to an issue of fact. I think you've got an interesting point here that the advocate may have made the same kind of claim. Down below, you talk about that, where it's a hypothetical, or it's just an opinion that somebody's presenting. But I think that you're presenting the same kind of opinion right here, based on the amount of money that the schools make from the revenues that they make from their sports. You get this $6 billion cost. Then the question becomes, well, how much does the school need? Do the schools need in order to provide access to these programs? We don't get any comparative data either from you or the advocate on this point. If for instance, the schools run a deficit in order to create sports programs to do this, so even though they bring in $6 billion of revenue, but they're spending $8 billion to be able to provide the sports programs at all the different levels, then that seems like the idea about what's the right thing to do would certainly be viewed a little bit differently, and I think you could use some information on that. I like the idea that you present later on that suggests, look, athletes often have difficulty. They can't have jobs, for instance, while they are training and playing. As a consequence, they are often short money. On the second point, you even mentioned, for instance, that even a full scholarship still leaves them short of being able to pay for all of their fees, the average having still to pay $3,500. So in essence, they need to have some source of revenue, and they are not able to have a source of revenue under the existing rules. I think that would be a contradiction that you could get a little bit more mileage out of. I thought that was a pretty good point. You kind of challenged the notion about the students being seen as being above, that's a perspective kind of thing. I think that that's a reasonable challenge to make there. I think you make it a little bit better on the third point. Lee Steinberg, by the way, that's how you say his name, and he is a guy that is probably the most famous sports agent of all time. I think the quote that you have here is really good, but what you need to do is make sure that the claim is clear. And the claim basically comes down to the fact that because these athletes don't have access to revenue, they are more likely to violate the rules that are set up under which they operate, which creates all of these complications. So in fact, it is the limiting of the athletes to be able to receive some compensation for what's going on here that encourages them to break those particular rules. I think that's an interesting way of looking at that problem. On the last point, I think that you had, like I said, a very effective argument that how the athletes are going to be perceived has less to do with whether or not they get money from the school and has everything to do with the amount of attention that they get, notoriety that they have on campus, press coverage, and those sorts of things. I thought that was a good counterclaim. I think you could use an example or two to support that point, but I think the challenge there is reasonable. All right, thank you.